Well, hey, you guys, good morning. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes because it's right at 9 o'clock. As we kind of wait, I just want to say that if you're not able to catch this live, I'm going to share it in several different places. So I'll put it on Instagram and even put the recording on the podcast. It'll be lots of different places. So if you jump in and have to jump back out, no worries. It'll definitely still be in lots of places for you to watch later. All right, I'm going to wait a couple minutes and we'll get started. We're going to be talking about purposeful passion projects, what those look like, and how we can make purpose a really important part of the process, because so often when it's not a part of the process, everything kind of falls apart. So we'll get started in just a few minutes. Okay, well, it's a little bit after 9, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think it's something that's really important to talk about. One of the questions I get asked most often, and I was sharing this over on Instagram earlier this week, is how do we make Genius Hour purposeful? Or how do so many of my kids will start a passion project or a Genius Hour project, and then they want to quit because their passion fizzles out. And so I want to just spend some time talking about how do we avoid that? You're never going to completely avoid it, but how do we get to a place where passion projects aren't just based on passion, but they're driven by purpose? And this is a really important conversation to have because, first of all, for me, I believe so much in this type of learning because of the impact that it had in my own classroom. So I just want to share really quickly, in case you don't know my story, Genius Hour for me changed everything. I almost left the classroom, almost left education completely because everything had become really mundane. I was in this place of not knowing if that's what I really wanted to continue to do for a career. And I know that a lot of people are in that same place right now, if we're honest. And so I knew I had to do something different. I knew I had to try something that I had never tried before. And for me, I was able to connect with Don Wettrick and some amazing educators, learn about Genius Hour. And for me, that is what really created the change and gave me back my passion for teaching. And I think my learners would tell you that for a lot of them, it gave them back their passion for learning as well. And so I learned so many lessons along the way. Of course, when we first started Genius Hour, it was a complete mess. So many things went wrong, but I knew that I had to stay the course and I knew that I had to figure some things out. And one of those things that I kind of figured out a little bit while I was in the classroom, and now looking back and reflecting, I can realize how important that is or was, is just the purpose that drives the projects that they're working on. And I think that's true for so much of just life in general, right? For us in education, I think a lot of people right now are reflecting on, hey, I was passionate about teaching for a long time. What is my purpose? What does that look like? And so as we talk about this, making Genius Hour purposeful, I want to share that it wasn't too long ago. I was writing, I think, the resource book for Genius Hour, and I came across I had heard people share this before, and then I had read it as well. And they talked about how purpose and passion really go hand in hand. And specifically, they shared how it's like a campfire, and passion is the flame. But a flame cannot sustain itself without a foundation. And so when you build a campfire, I would imagine, I don't do this often, but I would imagine when you build a campfire, you have to start with a really good foundation, and you have to be intentional about that. And that foundation is what sustains the flame or sustains the fire. And so considering that, when we think about passion and purpose, if passion is the flame, purpose is that foundation that we have to build for that flame to sustain itself. And so when you're thinking about starting Genius Hour or passion-based learning, it's really important to consider, how do we, before we ever jump into working on the projects, how do I help my learners build that foundation and consider their purpose first? And so that's really what I want to kind of zone in on and talk about, because I think there's one word that we need to keep in mind, and that's just intentionality. It's not just going to happen. Oftentimes our learners have no idea how to figure out what their purpose is, and we have to give them the tools and the ways to make that happen. And so I'm going to give you some of those things today. I'm going to give you some free tools that you can walk away with and utilize on Monday if you want. Lots of different things kind of to think about and consider, and do what works for you. I think that's something we have to understand as well, is that everyone's classroom is different. We're different as educators. And so while some of these things worked for me, this may spark an idea for you that this is just a launch pad for. You may not do it the exact same way that I did, and that's okay. Okay, before I get into kind of the specifics, if you are here, would you take a second to introduce yourself in the chat? Just kind of tell me who you are, where you're from. I would love to know. That's super helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of start talking about what I think this can look like and how we can do this in an intentional way. So like I said, passion without purpose will fizzle out every time. When I go to conferences or I'm talking to a district about Genius Hour, more often than not, a teacher will come to me and they will say, hey, we did Genius Hour. We started it. It sounded like a great idea. But then when we went to put it into place, my students just got bored, or they just got to a place to where they didn't want to work on their project anymore. And I always say that will always happen if we don't make purpose a priority. And so I think when we consider that and we think through, our goal is for our learners to stick with their projects. It's not always going to happen. Sometimes they're going to want to do something different, and that's okay. But I do think that if we can kind of make this purpose idea a priority, it could help with some of that. So first point, passion without purpose will always fizzle out. And that's why it's so important that we have this conversation when we talk about what purpose will look like. Okay, so I'm going to share some slides with you guys that I created when I started getting this question a lot. I thought, you know what, if I was in the classroom, what would help me most to help my learners figure out what this is? What would that look like? How would I do it? And in thinking through that, I just created some Google slides. I'm going to share the link to these slides in just a little bit, but I want to walk you through them because I shared them on Instagram this week. Lots of people have sent me DMs and asked for them, and I've shared them out. But I want to be intentional about talking about how I would use them and what they need to look like so that will make sense. So I'm going to share these with you now on the screen. Hopefully you can see this. The first slide is basically just a message from me to you, telling you how I would use these, what I think this can look like. And so the next slide, as we go through, is basically just an overview of helping your learners find their passion. It's not a secret. I'm a big fan of AJ Giuliani's passion bracket. If you haven't seen that, you definitely have to check it out. If you need access to it, let me know. I can tell you where to find it. But AJ created this amazing bracket. And on one side, he asks his learners, what do you love? And on the other side, he asks, what bothers you? And that bracket for me was super helpful in the classroom because it gave my learners the opportunity to understand passion isn't just about what I love, right? It's not just, I love Legos, so I'm going to build out of Legos for the next 3 weeks. That's not a Genius Hour project. I just think it's important to say that out loud. I really think Genius Hour projects have to be more than that. And I think sometimes they get a bad rap because people think that it's just about a kid saying what they love and then doing that thing for a certain amount of time. And we have an opportunity to take it so much further than that. And it's important that we do that. Diane, I just want to say hi. I'm so glad you're here for sure. And I hope this is helpful. So thanks for sharing in the chat that you've dropped in. So looking at this slide in particular, the first three at the top are really about what do they enjoy? What do they love? And so you can see the questions are, what do you enjoy doing or thinking about? What would you like to learn more about? What would you like to spend time exploring? And this is just to get them thinking. If you just ask them, what do you like or what are you interested in? That may not give them the full picture of what's about to happen. I think it's important to say to them, what would you like to spend time exploring? Because that's what's going to be happening, is they're going to have to spend time on this. And so if it's something that they already know a lot about, or it's something that they don't necessarily want to spend time on, then they need to consider that. And so answering these questions can kind of get them to that. It can give them clarity about what's going to happen. And then the next three questions, what bothers you most? What would you like to change? And how would you like to help others? Now we're starting to get into purpose, right? We've talked about what do you want your project to be? And now we're talking about what do you want your project to do, or what type of impact do you want your project to have? And I think this is like taking Genius Hour to the next level. This is where they really get an opportunity to think through, hey, this is like that side of AJ's bracket where it says what bothers you most, because now we're thinking through, how can I use something that I really enjoy or something that I want to learn about to impact something that bothers me or something that I would like to change. And I think more now than ever before, our learners want that opportunity to create change and to have an impact on the world around them. And this generation has more of an opportunity to do that really than any generation before because of their access to the world. And so this is a big part of Genius Hour, not just asking them what they love, but also asking them what impact they'd like to have. So this is kind of the first really opportunity to give them clarity about what Genius Hour is all about and how this is going to work. And so then the next slide, this is simply something I created because I've had so many teachers say to me, I have students who have no idea where to start, or I ask them what they're interested in or what they're passionate about, and they're like, I don't know. And why are you asking me that? That's not how we play the game of school, right? That's how my learners reacted. They were a little bit weirded out by the fact that I was giving them an opportunity to pursue their passions at school. It felt different because it's not something they typically experience. And so I created this just to give learners some choices. Like maybe they just don't know where to start. And these are like a springboard. So this by no means is this an exhaustive list. There are so many other ideas. This is just something to get them thinking. And when you have access to the slides and you're able to take some time to look at this, you'll see that when your learners click on one of these ideas, it will take them to a website. And on that website, they can then go and explore and kind of think through, is this something I want to learn about? And then it takes them through some other ideas as well that we're going to talk about before we wrap up today. So this is exactly what I said, just a springboard. And I think your learners, I think it'll give them like, oh, I may not have a passion for travel, but it reminds me of this other thing that I have wanted to learn about or I have wanted to think through. And so definitely not a complete list, but definitely something to get your learners started. All right, next slide, the big three. This is like, now that I've decided what I'm going to explore, what I'm going to pursue for my passion project, I'm going to document that and share with my teacher. And so you're asking them just kind of three big questions. What topic do you want to explore? Have you made a decision? What problem are you going to solve? And we're going to talk about problems in just a second and what that means. And then how will your project impact others? And I think this is important because that whole idea of how your project will impact others is something that I think we forget to ask them to think about, that you're not just working on this because it's something you're passionate about and it being all about you. We want them to really be intentional about thinking through, how can this impact others as well? And so I think there are different types of projects that our learners can work on. I think there's different things they can consider. Sometimes their project may be a kindness project, right? How is my project going to impact somebody else or impact someone in a positive way? Sometimes it might be an innovation project. It might be they're creating something new or they're making something new. There's lots of different options for them to consider as they work through their project and decide what type it is. So maybe they're creating something new, maybe they're doing something for others, or maybe it's a perspective project. I couldn't think of that third one for a second. I was like, what is the third one? Maybe it's a perspective project. And that perspective project is, I'm trying to change the way someone sees something, or I'm trying to change the way I see something. So a project may be a kindness project, having an impact on others, or making someone else's life or their experience better. An innovation project is creating something new or making something different. And then a perspective project is changing the way people see things. So you could almost ask them to consider those buckets as they're working on their projects. I think that really helps with passion. I see you guys dropping in the chat and saying hello. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thanks for being here. And I love some of these ideas, giving them a career quiz to find out their career path. Really, really good ideas. So there's lots of different ways you can make this happen. But I think sometimes our learners, I was actually talking to some 8th graders the other day, and we were talking about their passion projects. And a few of them were kind of stuck and like not sure what they should do. And we talked about those 3 buckets: kindness, innovation, and perspective. And it just kind of gave them, I know I've used this word a lot, but it really gave them a little bit of clarity on where they wanted to go with their project. They just didn't know what they wanted to do with it. And so when they had the opportunity to really think through that, all of a sudden they were able to say, hey, this is what I want my project to do. This is the impact that I want it to have. And it helped them kind of keep moving forward and take it to the next level. So, last slide on this in this deck. This is my favorite. And look, this is something I think that just doesn't apply to Genius Hour. I almost think we should have our learners writing these all the time. If you follow me on social media, I talk about these often, and it's just the idea of purpose statements. And how do we give our learners an opportunity to really say out loud what the purpose is behind whatever it is that they're working on or whatever it is that they've learned? So when we think about Genius Hour or passion-based learning, after they've gone through these steps that I just showed you in the slides, the last part of this is to share their purpose statement. This is kind of the big bow on top. This is them saying, this is what I'm doing for my project, and this is why I'm doing it. So it kind of goes, I would like to learn more about this. And we could stop there. And a lot of people do, right? Like Genius Hour is, what do you want to learn more about? And they say that and they stop there. And that's a big problem because when they stop there, we're cutting out the purpose. So we want to say, I would like to learn more about blank so that I can blank. And it's the so that I can part of that sentence that really kind of brings purpose in and helps them recognize that they're not just working on this project because it's what they chose. There is purpose behind it. And I love this idea of having a purpose statement for each project as a teacher, because if you have these purpose statements, you have an opportunity to stoke that flame when it starts to fizzle out. You can pull up that learner's purpose statement and you can say, hey, you said that you wanted to learn more about this so that you could whatever. And so then you can ask, have you done that? Have you done your so that I can? And that can sometimes stoke that fire enough to get it to ignite again and get them focused back on their project. So using a purpose statement for a Genius Hour project, I think is a really good idea, if I do say so myself. And I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's really simple. It's not hard to do. So I think when we think about project purpose statements for Genius Hour, obviously that can be really powerful. But I don't think it's a bad idea to use purpose statements every day in your classroom, right? Like at the end of a learning experience, have your students complete this sentence as their exit ticket or a reflection opportunity. Today I learned blank so that I can blank, because now they're making the connection between what they learned in class today and what they can do with it. And I'm telling you guys, when they start to do that, when they think through really asking themselves, why did I learn this and what can I do with it? That's when learning starts to be meaningful. And if you've ever heard me share before at all, you know, I always say, if it's not meaningful, it's a waste of our time and theirs. So if we can help them make those connections to something that is meaningful, I think that can be really powerful. There's a question in the chat. Would you display the purpose statement for accountability? I think you could. I think you could have them share their purpose statements with others. I think you could display them. And I think that's just up to you and your class and how they would react to that. Like I said, every class is different. Every learner is different. But I think it's something to consider. And I think it could help some of your learners to see other purpose statements. I just think this is a really powerful idea and super simple. Like this is really manageable. It's not difficult to do. And you're putting them in the driver's seat. You're saying, look, I'm not going to tell you why you're doing this project or why you've learned what you've learned. That's up to you to make that connection. And putting them in the driver's seat gives them an opportunity to be more self-aware and to make those decisions and make so many of the connections that we need them to make. But I think oftentimes we as educators feel like we have to connect those dots for them. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes letting them connect the dots makes it even more meaningful. And so those are the slides. Those are kind of the Genius Hour, the purpose slides that I wanted to share with you and that I've shared on Instagram recently. I'm going to put the link up now. If you want access to these, that's the link, bit.ly/GH purpose. GH is capitalized. It is case sensitive. So if you want to take a picture of that or you want to make sure you write that down, you can access these 100% free. Just type in that link. It's going to ask you to make a copy of the slides. So if you give this link to your learners, which is what you would want to do, they only need to make the copy once. That's important to remind them. They don't have to if they keep going to this link, they're going to continue to make new copies. So they only have to go to it once. They'll have these slides in their drive. And then they can access those as they're starting out their passion project. So these are really for the beginning of a passion project. This is really an opportunity for them to get off to a good start and really consider purpose at the beginning of their project. So these are slides that you would use at the beginning of a Genius Hour project for your students to consider their purpose and that kind of get started on the right path. Okay, one more thing that I want to share is thinking about a passion project power start. And this is just something, I often think about these things often because I just consider if I was in the classroom or if I was really getting started with Genius Hour and I wanted to do this in a way that made sense or that would help my learners, what would that look like? And I was thinking about this idea of a power start for passion projects. And so I want to, I love that Diana is saying in the chat that she launched and used these slides on Friday and her fourth graders loved it. So that makes me really excited. I'm excited to see where this goes and how these kind of play out in the classroom. Okay, so let me share this next slide with you. Let me see if I can get it to pull out. There you go. This is an image that I've shared lately on social media, and it's just this idea of a passion project power start and 3 things to keep in mind. I obviously tend to think in threes. Everything that I do is like 3s or 6s or whatever. But I think if you wanted even a simpler idea, maybe those slides are too much and you just want to be able to give your students a simpler way to think about that, I think this graphic can be really helpful. So one of the things I've shared before, like 5 mistakes that I made, and in the new Genius Hour book that comes out this summer, I actually added an entire chapter about mistakes that I made when I started Genius Hour. And one of the mistakes that I made was that I didn't make purpose a priority. We didn't have really real conversations before we started Genius Hour. I just thought I was going to say, you're going to get to pursue your passion, and my kids were going to be stoked about that. Nothing could have been further from the truth. They were like, what are we even doing right now? And so I feel like if I would have spent more time on some of these aspects, it would have benefited. We would have been off to a better start. Eventually, it leveled out and my kids loved it. I loved it. And I'm so thankful just for that strategy that we used in my classroom. But if I would have had this at that time, I think it would have helped make a little more sense to them. So you can see it's kind of like a Venn diagram. And these 3 things kind of have to be in place for the project to be meaningful for them. And I think a lot of times when we think about Genius Hour, we always think about that first circle that you see there. We think about letting them find their passion. Well, sometimes they don't know their passion until they kind of figure out their purpose or what problem they'd like to address. So it's really all 3 of these things that have to be in place before they start on a Genius Hour project for it to kind of make sense. And so this same idea happened in the slides that I just showed you. Again, this is just a simpler way of thinking through this. So asking your learners, hey, what is your passion? What do you love to do? Then asking them to consider their why. Why are you doing this? That would be their purpose, so that I can. And then the problem, what are you trying to change? What are you trying to impact? And letting them be really intentional about thinking through that. One of my friends, my thought partner, actually, Carrie Espin, I was sharing this with her and we were kind of talking through this. She always helps me reflect and kind of think through how it could look different. And she was saying, you could almost separate these 3 circles and have your learners list some passions, list some of their purposes, and list some problems that they'd like to solve. And then they could figure out like which one of those match up, almost like how could I combine these 3 circles to make a project that I can really get jazzed about and get on board with. And then bring those things together and help your learners understand that, hey, when you have your passion, your purpose, and your problem, when we put those 3 things together, that's what's going to create a meaningful project that you're going to want to continue to work on. And you want it to be sustainable. You don't want it to just be something that you do. They get tired of it. You get tired of it. And I always say, if Genius Hour isn't manageable for you, the teacher, and it isn't meaningful for your learners, then it's not going to be sustainable. Somebody's going to want to quit. Either you're going to want to be done with it or they're going to want to be done with it. And that makes it really hard. And so thinking about these things, I think, makes Genius Hour more meaningful. It will help it be more sustainable. And really, it will help it be more manageable for you. Because when you have these things documented, like I said earlier, you have that opportunity to know how to connect with a learner when they do get bored and they want to quit, or how to, if nothing else, and first of all, that Genius Hour accomplishes a lot. But if nothing else, it gives you an opportunity to know your learners so well and to see them from a perspective that you probably don't see them from just in a traditional learning environment. I know that a lot of my learners their personalities were completely different when they were working on Genius Hour. I worked with gifted learners. And so a lot of times in a traditional classroom setting, they were all business. I mean, they were doing whatever they had to do to get the A. Many of them, not all of them, were compliant and they wanted to check off the boxes. But when it came to Genius Hour, that was really when I was able to see their personality. It was when I was able to see who they were. And it was just, I can't say enough about it. It was so much fun. It gave me such a connection to them. And it made me want to be in the classroom. It was no longer me going into the classroom, going through the motions, doing what I knew didn't work. And it was an opportunity for my students to learn the standards by doing, practice life ready skills, and to make the connections that I knew that they needed to make for learning to be meaningful. So thinking about purpose, I could talk about Genius Hour all day. We just sit here all day and I could talk about it. But I really wanted this morning to focus on purpose and how important that is. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope it makes a little bit of sense. If you have any questions or you want to know anything else about this type of learning, or if this is the first time you're hearing about Genius Hour and you're like, wait, what is she even talking about? She let her kids pursue their passions. I 100% did, and it changed everything. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this and you want to learn more about it, I would love to connect and share that with you. I want to share a couple of other opportunities with you guys and just important things that I want to make sure everybody knows. I talk a lot about Genius Hour over on Instagram. I do a lot of things in my stories and in my posts around a lot of talk about gifted learners and a lot of talk about Genius Hour. So if you want to follow me there, I'd love to connect with you. My handle is just a meaningful mess with underscores, _meaningful_mess. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Same thing. I share a lot there as well. And then finally, something that I am so excited about that I want to make sure I tell you about is that I believe that teachers deserve passion projects too. And a lot of us are in a place right now where it's really important that we figure out our purpose, that teaching has been our passion for so long, but that purpose, if we don't rebuild that foundation again, that passion is starting to fizzle out. And so I'm launching on February 1st, the Passion-Based Teaching Academy. I'm so excited about this. Such an opportunity to build a community of educators who say, look, there's a strategy, idea, or something that I want to try in my classroom that I think will work with my learners. And this is just going to be intentional time for you to figure that out. So it's professional development, but it's extremely personal and probably unlike any PD that you've experienced before. So that's launching on February 1st. I can't talk about it too much because I'll probably give too much away. But if you want to know more about that or you want to check it out, you can see the link here. It's bit.ly/PBTA, all caps, and then registration, all lowercase. So bit.ly/PBTA registration. Check that out. I would love to see you there. It's going to be so much fun. Oh, I can't wait. But all of that being said, I appreciate you being here this morning. It was early on a Saturday morning, but I wanted to make sure that I shared that just because I'm getting so many questions about purpose and the role that it plays in Genius Hour. My hope is that the words that I've said make sense. I am just so excited. The circle template, there's questions in the chat about that. The circle template I will share on Facebook. It's also on my Instagram, so you can check that out. I don't have a link to it, but I can definitely share the image on social media for sure. So I'll send that to you if you've put that in the chat. But all of that being said, I just want to say thank you so much for the work that you do. I know that it's not easy, but man, I think there is a lot of exciting things happening right now. There's a lot of hard things happening, but you guys, it's an opportunity to create sustainable change. And so I think it's important that we have the hard conversations, talk about what this looks like, and just keep moving forward. So if you're asking in the chat, there's some questions now about the links. I will share the links in the chat below as well. So those will be there after the video. So again, thank you for being here. You guys have a great Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. Get some rest for sure. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.